What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Ani-mity, welcome back to the channel, and welcome to another episode of the Y series, this time with the Helleverse. Before I do jump into talking about that, I have a few things I just wanted to get out of the way. First and foremost being, the day after this recording comes out, because as always, I post my videos Sundays, 9 a.m. Been doing that for a while, but in case you haven't noticed that or haven't been watching for when these videos come up, the day before this video comes out, I'm going to be going to Anime Expo in New York City, which is really, really exciting. I got tickets for this in Christmas, so I've been very much looking forward to being able to do this this year. So if you guys want me to give a kind of review, I'm not going to do a vlog series of me being at Anime Expo just because, you know, I like having the experience of some of these things to myself, but I'd be happy to share my thoughts, my experience on a lot of the stuff that happened while I was out at Anime Expo. So, if you guys want to hear me talk about that, if you guys want to hear my thoughts and how I felt about a lot of this stuff, let me know in the comments down below. I would be more than happy to talk about that kind of stuff if that's something you guys are interested in hearing. But yeah, I'm very excited for that. If anyone's going to be there Saturday, I'm going to be, or I guess I was there, so this makes this a little bit late to say. Don't know where I was going with that. You know, I never know where I'm going with these things. Let's be real here. Anyway, just wanted to say that. If you guys want to hear me talk about that, let me know in the comments down below. I'd be more than happy to. And then before I do get into the discussion for today, there may or may not be spoilers within this video. Of course, you guys aren't going to know unless you watch it. But, you know, if you want to not be spoiled possibly for any plot lines, any characters that may or may not be in the trailers, any plot points that may or may not be revealed from the trailers, or anything that you just don't already know from it being out on the internet, I would recommend going to watch the content and then come back to this video. The Helleverse is a very fun franchise, and I'm going to discuss in this video why I think it works. So the reason why I'm doing both series at once is because, you know, I was thinking about how I wanted to go about this, and I was thinking, like, okay, well, what are the things I think that Helleverse does really well versus what do I think Has Been Hotel does very, very well? And really, I think both series, for the same reasons, their stories work very well. And because of that, I just felt like, as much as I would love to be able to have two separate videos for this, covering the show, because I think it's a great show, I think it would just be easier and a bit more efficient of me to talk about both shows at the same time, and just kind of give my general thoughts on what I think both shows do really, really well, why it is I think both shows resonate so strongly with me. So first, how did I even get into these shows? What was it that kind of drew me to these shows in the first place? The answer is a friend of mine told me about the series back during my, like, sophomore year, which feels really weird to say. That was like 3 years ago now or so. So just it feels really weird to kind of look back on it in that way. But I remember I was with the anime club. We were in our auditorium, and someone was mentioning, like, oh, you got to check this out. Like, it's a really, really good show. And I'm like, you know, I don't always like following the latest and newest trends of stuff. And I'm usually like, well, you know, if it's a show especially, I mean, I have 4,000 things I want to watch eventually. The show has to be, like, insanely good for me to consider getting into it, or I just have to be drawn to it in some shape or form. And, you know, given that's a show that takes place in hell, given that it's a musical kind of show, given that there's such a focus and drive on characters usually in those types of shows, already I was starting to get interested in it, but not enough that I was like, okay, I gotta drop everything to go watch this, like, now. And, you know, there were things here and there that I heard about it, things that I saw of it, but nothing really that, like, pulled me directly to the show. And it wasn't until I found that I had some time. I was in LA, and we were driving around there, and a friend of mine had their playlist shuffling, and one of the songs on there was Thank You and Good Night. And I ended up falling really in love with that song. I don't know what it is about it. It's just, every time I listen, and I'll do a video discussing my thoughts on a lot of the songs another day, but just something about that song made me really like, I guess, the focus on the connection of the characters for specifically Has Been Hotel. So I started watching Has Been Hotel from there, and then once I finished Has Been Hotel, that same friend showed me 2 minutes notice, and I was like, okay, well, now I gotta check out Helleverse. So I ended up watching both shows. You know, they're a very good show. I definitely had, like, a kind of, like, peak obsession period of it. I don't know if I necessarily would call it, like, my favorite of all time show, but definitely it's very, very good. It's a show that is up there for me as a favorite, just not one of my like all-time favorites. Like not touching my top 10 anytime soon. But, you know, it was very, very good. I was very glad that I got the chance to watch it. I got to talk about it with a bunch of my friends, that I get to recommend it to a bunch of people now, especially Chris, who hasn't seen it whatsoever. Just a bunch of different stuff in that show. I think they do really, really well. And one of the things is like I said, the focus on the characters. Now, if you guys have been following my Y series long enough by now, you know that one of the main things I focus on when it comes to how well a show works is the characters. For me, if the characters aren't narratively interesting or if the characters don't really stand well without the story itself, then I'm not really going to care. The thing is, the story only works if I care enough about the characters to see them get through the end or achieve their goals in some shape or form. And thankfully for at least for Hazbin Hotel, it solidly achieves this and does so very, very well. With Hello Boss, it achieves it in a different way to where it doesn't feel as solid, but it still achieves it. And I think it is, again, by the same means, just with a very different character that makes that work. So, what is it about Charlie that I think works really, really well? I mean, generally the like happy-go-lucky characters, there's a balance that I think needs to be achieved with it, and I think that Charlie does achieve that well. She shows that yes, she's gonna be super positive, she's gonna be like always looking on the bright side and the positivity and everything, but she also shows that she's going to be able to push back when she has to. That it's not all sunshine and rainbows. That she has this other side of her. And I feel like just that balance of her character in that, and like the flaws of her that we get to see, her doubts, her anxieties, her just push and her desire to make this goal happen, but then also the smaller things that keep pushing her down, I think make Charlie a very well-rounded character. It makes her very interesting to watch when she is on screen. And I also like the fact that despite Charlie being the main character, being like our protagonist, the one that we're following for the most part, she doesn't feel like she necessarily like steals the spotlight, which is something that I think that both shows also do very, very well. It's like it's an ensemble cast. The characters are kind of spread out, and we kind of have different stories we're following through each. And with Hazbin Hotel especially, something that I appreciate is that it knew what it wanted to say with each character and didn't waste a single beat telling us about these characters and getting us to know these characters very, very well, which I think is a massive plus for any kind of show. You know, I'll get to some of this later. Just I always wanted to spend more time, but I think the time that we did have with all these characters worked very, very well for the show. It made me get to really appreciate Angel Dust and getting to see their story and their development against Valentino. Even Husk, who like has smaller moments where his character isn't really the spotlight, made me interested. I mean, like the moments he has with Angel are great. The scene he had with Alistair, where Alistair was about to rip his head off, was really, really good because that showed something about Hux as a character and got me interested in him as a character. And for like all these characters, just little moments that we got with them gave me enough that I'm like, ooh, okay, you're a character I'm going to want to learn more about. And it's the same thing with Hell of a Boss. With Hell of a Boss, similarly, we have characters that in like the very short in short bursts and moments, we get so much about the characters. But with Hell of a Boss, it doesn't, or not so much that it doesn't feel like it has a clear sense of direction. It's just the direction is kept a little bit more mysterious, where it kind of leaves the viewers more intrigued and left me more like, okay, well now I'm curious to know where you're going to take this or what you're going to try to tell me with this. Like some of the themes of it are made apparent through like Blitz, who's a imp who's trailblazing, who's developing his own path compared to the rest of his kind and such. But we get things like that. We get the idea that class is a very big theme with really both the shows, and kind of like the class of the Hellspawn versus the Angels in Hazbin Hotel versus just the different layers within Hell and the hierarchy of how that works. Like Hell of a Boss takes the world of Hazbin Hotel and like expands it to a humongous degree, giving us so much to look at and so much about the world, which I think in turn makes me appreciate Hazbin Hotel so much more because like, okay, there's things about this world I understand more because of the other show. And like, I think that the secondary thing that I always look at is kind of the world and how that affects the characters and such. I think that the way in which both shows explore that is very good, especially with Hell of a Boss. With Hell of a Boss, again, we get so much about how the different hierarchies of hell work. We get the perspective of the different rings. We get to learn a little bit more about the interpretation, the perspective, or the perception that most of the Hellspawn have for the people who come from the different rings, and kind of get a little sense of how a lot of this in Hell works. It's like the mechanics make sense more in Hell of a Boss, which in turn informs how I'm looking at Hazbin Hotel and kind of looking at how all these characters interact with each other, how a lot of their stuff is developed. You know, I'd love to see more crossover. Like, we have little things here and there for how it works. There's like the fact that the shows both take place in a similar world and have like little hints here and there of this is how they're connected, I think just makes both shows really, really strong and makes the overall world really interesting to get into. And I will say, just for Hell of a Boss, like, the Hell of a Boss always felt like the darker, grittier version, just because you have more cynical characters at the forefront of it. I mean, you have Blitz, who's a wisecracker against a lot of the people. You have like people like with Hazbin Hotel, we're starting at the top with Charlie being the daughter of the leader of Hell, versus Blitz, who's starting all the way from the bottom, trying to build his way up. And I kind of like the arc Blitz is taking toward getting there, and then also the shortcomings that he comes across along that path to it. And I think just it makes his character very interesting to follow, and it makes the story for him interesting to see. So like the characters in both are really, really good, and mostly by how Hello Boss does its world building, it makes both shows' world so much bigger and makes the scenery for so much so vivid. And it kind of makes me interested to see, like, again, a lot of these characters, getting to know more about them. I mean, especially with I guess I'll be shifting now into the things I do think the show could improve on. With both shows, it never feels like we have a dedicated antagonist or a thing that we're necessarily trying to go against. Like with Hazbin Hotel, at least we have like Adam, I guess, but also it gives us little bits of like, okay, well, there's also this development with Vox and with Alistair, and then we have stuff going on with Lilith, who feels like she's going to be some kind of antagonistic force against Charlie and such. At some points, we have Valentino, obviously, as an antagonistic force, but like, we get little bits of them, but never enough to really like sink our teeth into. Or I don't feel like I really got enough to really sink my teeth into knowing what these villains are after, or what the antagonists are trying to do, and that development, how it impedes the characters that we're following, and that kind of thing. Like the the writing gives us enough that we understand the characters, but always I think that there's more to be done. And the fact that they said for Hazbin Hotel they're going to be doing more focus with Vox as a main villain for the next season, I think is really, really interesting, because I've always wanted to see, like, Alistair and Vox. We know the two of them had, like, some kind of competition with each other, but with how Stayed Gone went and how it kind of portrayed the rivalry between the two, it sounds like Alistair was absolutely knocking the hell out of Vox. And then when he just randomly decided to just drop out, that's how Vox won. So, like, the line that Valentina said, like, you still pissed he almost beat you that one time. It's like, it feels like Alistair would be beating him relatively consistently, and especially with just how effortlessly he backhanded Vox in Stayed Gone. I'm interested to know a bit more about their relationship. I'm interested to know kind of like, how did Vox end up getting his foothold in? And how did Vox end up developing stuff? If that's something that is, you know, if that's something that we should know by now. I didn't understand that from watching it, and if that isn't something that we know yet, I want to know. It's something that I want to see more of in it. And then with Hell of a Boss, again, there's people like Enthralls, who I think is the closest thing that I think the show has to an antagonist. More so Enthralls than Stella, but then also kind of Stella somewhere in there. But like there are multiple, I guess, antagonistic forces that exist within Hell of a Boss that make the journey toward them. Just by the world itself as the antagonist is kind of what I feel like the show is trying to say. But at the same time, like, there is something to having like a direct face to put to it, and I think Enthralls fits that role kind of well in at least the last episode that we got of Hell of a Boss, and I'm interested to see how that develops in time. And you know, you could argue that maybe I'm missing the point of the show by saying that the show doesn't have an antagonistic force because of the fact the world is portrayed so much as being the thing that's stopping them. And also, before people come at me, yeah, do you really consider the angels as the threat here, or the the government agencies or that kind of like no, they were a pest and an annoyance at best to the characters. And again, another one of those like we don't really know where they're coming from with it. It's like, it makes sense that they were a small splinter group that believed in the paranormal and then developed into something more when they caught them on video, but then that didn't really feel like it had a lot of consequence to hell or that kind of thing. And like I do wish that that did have a bit more sway in like mastermind and the trial and such, or like some rules behind like why it's so forbidden that travel, or at least by the grimoire, by any of the stuff there, or how any of that really works. That's something that I'd love to know a little bit more about. Um, and there's just like some things about like how I guess we understand like there's a hierarchy within Hell of a Boss of you have the sins, then below them you have the Goetia, then below the Goetia you have the overlords, or I'm assuming that's how that works. But like there isn't really much of an explanation as to what's going on with it, especially because with um with Hazbin Hotel we don't really get a lot of exploration of that. I mean, like it took me a while before I realized, oh, Lucifer is supposed to be one of the sins, or he's supposed to be one of the rings of hell, and that all of Hazbin takes place within the Pride Ring, and how a lot of that affects things. 'Cause, like it didn't seem like Vox was particularly worried about interactions with Lucifer or such, or I mean, messing with the daughter of one of the sins. It feels like there would be a much bigger reaction to that. And I guess like Vox feels like he's very fixated on Alistair more than he is on Charlie and that kind of thing. And I'm kind of interested to see like why that's the case. I mean, like, is it just because Lucifer has the reputation of like he's very hands off with a lot of what goes on in hell? Is that why he's not as threatened by him? But like little things like that, I would be curious to know and get to see like kind of what the overall relationship is there, and kind of again use that to explain the world a bit more and how Vox has his foothold, kind of what the overlords are in comparison to the sins, and a lot of a lot of again this hierarchy of how a lot of this stuff works. Because I'd be very interested to know a lot of these different things. But overall, I think the world is very vivid. It gives us a lot to sink our teeth into. It gives us a lot that makes the world pop in a lot of ways, and the characters do a very good job of making the world a lot bigger. But there's always going to be some things that I want to see more of. And I guess like between the two shows, like Hazbin Hotel feels like it was too fast, and we didn't really get a lot of time with the characters. But the time it did have, we got a lot from it. Versus Hello Boss, it feels like it's taking it a lot slower, which is good, and it's giving us a lot more time with these characters. But then it feels like I'm also kind of losing sight of what the overall drive is. And like I understand what the goal of the imps is, but it never feels like they're really pushing toward that goal. It never really feels like they're like on that next level where they're like, okay, one more thing and we can achieve this. Which I mean, like I know it's like probably more things that have to come, but like it never feels like they've really made that progression so far. And it's like the themes of things acting against them, I kind of do want to see explored a little bit more, because the episodes where it is explored, it's very, very good, and I like what they do with it. But I feel like they can always do a little bit more with how they're exploring it in at least in the context of the world of Hell of a Boss. And again, maybe by extension, let's explore that a little bit more in Hazbin Hotel. And I'd be interested to see kind of the crossover there, and like what the Lucifer has to say about the imps and such, or what I have to say about this imp starting their own agency. And then I know there's also like the joke of was it Hell of a Post that was in the first episode of Hazbin Hotel, the actual first episode, not the pilot. Um, but I'm curious to know, like, is that directly them? Like, is that like some end result of whatever happens at the end of Hell of a Boss, or is it just a throwaway reference of sorts? Or I don't know. I'm curious to know, like, just where the crossover between the two, because the worlds are connected, and there are things that make it clear that there is a unit, like, there is something that's supposed to tether the two together beyond the fact that they both take place in hell, and I'm very curious to know, like, what that through line is. Just because, I think that would make, again, for a very interesting story, that would make for a very interesting world development to give us. But yeah, so those are my reasons for why I think the Helleverse works very, very well, and what I do think that I'd want to see more of to really get like deeper into the story. I mean, listen, I'm always going to come back as long as the songs are bops and as long as the characters are developing as they are. As long as they keep that pace up, then I'm definitely going to come back for more. But, you know, with every show, there's going to be things that I want to see more of. There's going to be things that I think, as an audience, we want to see more of within the show. These are just my thoughts on it. Overall, I do think the show is very, very good. These are just why I think that it resonates so strongly with me specifically. And I'd love to hear from you guys, what you guys think. If you guys agree with me, if you guys disagree with me, if you guys think I'm just talking absolute garbage. I'd love to be able to hear all of that in the comments down below. And, you know, if I see a comment that I really, really like, I'd love to make a video on it. I'd love to be able to do a talk back on any of the things that I think or feel about it. And I think at one point, I might go back to one of my my Ruby videos and do a talk back directly. Because, like, Ollie and I were answering people in the comments down to that, and, you know, that is a thing I want to do, and I know I could do, like, a quicker reaction to it than I would be able to talk about. Because, as I'm sure you guys know, I can gab. I can definitely gab. So, I think, like, for the things that are worthy of a lengthier discussion than a quick just here are my thoughts on it, I'd love to be able to do a talk back. So please don't hesitate to put something down in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say or what you guys think or feel about any of the stuff I've talked about in this video. And I'd love to be able to just hear from you guys and just have that connection with my community here. So that being said, I'm going to wrap this up here. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Thank you guys so much for listening to me and enjoying what it is I have to do with this. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.